Kia ora, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thursday of our Wellbeing Webinars. My name's George. I work in the Wellbeing team. I was around yesterday handing out some fruit on the lawn. You might have seen me on the Instagram, quite famous in the Wellbeing department. It's obviously quite an unusual morning this morning with some news in Christchurch, so that will no doubt create some anxiety for a lot of people. So just remember to take care of yourself. You've obviously got studies and exams that you're focusing on for the next couple of weeks. It's still important to keep up to date with the news and things, but I wouldn't recommend that you spend all day Googling theories and ideas and whatnot. So just keep an eye on the news if that's something you're interested in doing. Check in with your friends and whānau that might not be in Christchurch. And obviously, if you have any symptoms of COVID-19, get yourself a test. We're supposed to have a vaccination clinic tomorrow here at uni at the UCSA in Haideroa, but we'll have to wait and see any announcements this afternoon. But if we still go ahead and you are not vaccinated, this should serve as a good reminder as to why we need to get vaccinated. So sorry about this starting a little bit late, but today we're just going to talk about the fear of failure. So fear of failure is a real thing, both for students at university and for people more widely. It's quite normal to have this fear of failing. Society has kind of taught us that failure is bad and it represents more than just that one particular scenario. So we're going to talk today a little bit about what that means for students and how we can support you and how you can support yourself to recognize failures as a lot more than just failing in whatever particular activity it was. So just here on the screen, you'll see there's a wall of failures. So that's an example of a project that some students at Harvard University created. So, very prestigious university where you would think that failure wasn't something that was happen very often, but it does. And this is an example of that. So they were trying to normalize the awareness around the fear of failure by sharing some examples of different failings that they had had. Let me just get to the next slide. So a little bit of data from the university. This might be quite interesting. So in 2019, this survey was done. So 100 new to UC students that departed, that had thoughts of departing early. The fear of failure was their number one reason for that. So you can see that it is quite a real, let's just skip on ahead there. It is quite a real reason for concern for students, is the fact that they have a fear of failing. It's not necessarily the most important or impactful reason why they considered leaving early, but they've definitely mentioned that it did have a big impact on that. So interestingly, feeling the pinch of a fear of failure correlates with poorer well-being. So 41% of respondents to a survey with the statement, if I fail at university, I'm a failure as a person. A lot of 41% of people agreed that statement was true. So, oh man, Tim, my boss, made this PowerPoint and it's on some kind of time limit. So we'll just have to flick back. So there's some academics that have failed quite a lot in their careers. This is an example of a Princeton University assistant professor who has a list of, it's almost like a CV, but it's a CV of his failings. So that's something quite unique, and it is a human thing. So a quote from Barack Obama here. He ran for Congress in 1999 and got beaten. He'd been, in that scene for a long time, putting a lot of time away from his family. And so for him to lose in something that I'm assuming expected that he would be quite well, would succeed at, he'd invested a lot of time into it. So he then went on to somehow fight the fear of failure, and we're going to talk about that in a second, and was very successful post that failure. So the message there is that failure can happen before great success, and even very successful people experience failure from time to time. And I guess when Barack Obama was the president, not a lot of people probably recognized this failure that he might have had, but it was definitely would have been something that he knew had happened. So some core messages and reflections on the fear of failure. So it's part of learning. So some of the most meaningful things that people can do in their life, including studying, involves the possibility of failing. So a lot of things we do aren't guaranteed to be successful, and that's what makes them exciting. We had a chaplain, Spanky Moore, here who likes to think of, he used to say that we should think of failing as a form of feedback and remind ourselves that if something is worth doing, it's worth persevering until you get good at it. So even some highly successful people fail. It's part of learning. It's not the same thing as defeat. You make sure you be kind to yourself, and it can play an important part of success. So as we go into exam time, you obviously will be, the fear of failure will most likely be related to your exam marks. So if you've received a bad mark, we've got some practical steps that the student success team have created that can help you deal with that. Man, there we go. So there are, step one would be to recognize those feelings. So it's pretty normal after a failing to have that moment of grief and be upset, frustrated, whatever that might look like for you. A lot of those feelings are normal. So give yourself a little bit of time out. Be kind to yourself. We all have different ways we engage in what's commonly called self-care. So whether that is some exercise as suggested on the slides there, whether it's some, cooking up your favorite meal, hanging out with your friends, checking in with your family. There might be a place in Christchurch you like to spend some of your time, such as the beach. So really just spend a little bit of time dealing with how that failure might feel for you, and be kind to yourself. The second step is evaluating the situation. So this can be something that I think we gloss over quite a lot after a failure, especially with an exam, because you're about to head into a summer period, so there might not be any real incentive for you to look back at that exam and see what went wrong. But I think that can be really beneficial in the long term, especially if you're in your first or second year and you're going to have to encounter exams and maybe these types of topics, questions again. So doing a little bit of work to find out what went wrong, determining what you had control over, and then maybe having a chat with the lecturer, tutor, your classmates, or you can always talk to an advisor, someone here at Student Care, or the health centre counselling team can be more than happy to talk to you about how you're feeling, and less of that academic stuff and more of that personal. And the third step would be to make a plan of action. So thinking about positive next steps to help improve, asking questions in classes and tutorials, focusing or spending a little bit more time on that particular subject. I know that when I was doing 4 or 5 papers in a particular semester, I'd always end up spending less time on one of them. You'd choose the one that maybe was the hardest, would be often the one that you'd spend less time on. So thinking about how you balance that time in the future, and whether if you've got another paper that's got similar work in it that you struggled with, maybe recognizing that, okay, it might not be enjoyable to spend more time on that, but maybe it is necessary. So reframe how you think about failing is easier said than done, but hopefully from what we've talked about today, failure being a part of learning, some of these things here, being kind to yourself, and just recognizing that in that moment it's going to be painful, it's going to hurt, but it doesn't necessarily dictate how successful you're going to be in the future. What does dictate that is the work that you put in and how you overcome that failing. So let me just got a little something to show you here. So part of what we have at the university is an area called the Wellbeing Hub, which is an online platform with a whole lot of wellbeing content on it. You can see it here. So how would you find that from the front page? If this is the main page that you're on, you go to support services, Wellbeing Hub, support for study up here, and fear of failure is the second one. So click on that. We've got a lot of this content that we've covered today is shared on this page. So Ekant Veer, a professor here at UC, a director of the UC City program, says he's become pretty good at failing because it happens so often. There's some PhD students that shared there. Alan DeGeneres, most of us will know Alan. Robert Kennedy. So there's a few quotes that scroll across the screen there. These points that we covered on that previous slide, and a little bit more explanation to what that might mean for you. And then a few resources, some famous failings, learning from some of the people that have failed through video, which is quite cool. It's very interactive. And we would encourage you to share your own story. If looking at Barack Obama's quote or reading quotes by Professor Ekant Veer help you to recognize, we would really enjoy you sharing your story with us so we can share that with others. And there's some support and empowerment options here. So we've got the Academic Skills Centre, obviously a crucial team for you to prepare for your academic workloads, and teams like Student Care and the Counselling Service, Te Waka Pākākano, are there to support you with pastoral care. So fear of failure is real, teams. It's something that a lot of us will face multiple times in our life. And hopefully today's presentation has shared with some practical tips with you on how you can combat that. Wishing you all the best with your exams. Like I mentioned at the start of the webinar, it's a pretty uncertain, anxious day today. So take care of yourself. Reach out if you need any support. We're here in the Forestry building, the Student Support Centre, and there's always someone here who can see you if you do need to talk. So just come on over and see us, and wishing you all the best for your exams.